The stars burned bright against the infinite blackness of space as Alara Winters stared out the viewport of Nexus Station. The massive space research facility orbited at the edge of our solar system, its sophisticated array of sensors constantly scanning the cosmos for signs of intelligent life. Earth glowed as a distant blue speck, almost indistinguishable from the countless other stars visible from this vantage point. "Another late night, Dr. Winters." The voice of Adrian Nix broke through her contemplation. Alara turned to face the tall, lanky journalist who had been stationed on Nexus for the past month, documenting the groundbreaking work of the Xenolinguistics Division. His presence had initially been an annoyance. The last thing the research team needed was a reporter hovering over their shoulders. But Adrian had proven himself both respectful and genuinely curious about their work. "The universe doesn't sleep, Mr. Nix," she replied with a tired smile. "Neither can I." At 42, Dr. Alara Winters was the leading expert in decoding extraterrestrial communications. Her innovative algorithms had already helped humanity establish preliminary contact with 2 non-human civilizations in nearby star systems. But those had been active, living cultures. What truly fascinated her were the echoes, transmissions from long-dead civilizations that had sent their messages into the void before their extinction. "Any progress on the Cygnus signal?" Adrian asked, joining her at the viewport. Alara shook her head. "Nothing substantial, just fragments that don't connect." She had been working on the mysterious transmission from the Cygnus constellation for months. Unlike other signals that followed recognizable mathematical patterns, this one seemed almost deliberately obscured, as if encoded specifically to resist conventional analysis. "Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved," Adrian suggested. "That's not how science works," Alara replied firmly. "Every puzzle has a solution. We just haven't found the right approach yet." The soft chime of her neural implant interrupted their conversation. Nexus Station's AI was alerting her to an anomaly in the data stream. She closed her eyes briefly, interfacing directly with the station's computer network through the neural link that all senior researchers were required to maintain. "I need to go," she said abruptly. "Something's happening with the long-range arrays." The monitoring center was a circular chamber ringed with holographic displays showing real-time data from the station's sensor network. Most of the night shift staff had their attention fixed on a particular display showing an unusual energy spike originating from a previously unremarkable sector of space. "What do we have?" Alara asked, approaching her colleague Dr. Kyle Forsyth, who was directing the monitoring team's efforts. Kyle's silver-streaked hair was disheveled, suggesting he'd been called from sleep. "Unusual transmission pattern from HD 219034. About 21 light-years away. It began approximately 40 minutes ago and hasn't stopped since. HD 2199134 has no known civilizations," Alara noted, scanning the preliminary data. "The survey team found ruins on the second planet but estimated extinction at least 50,000 years ago, which makes this particularly interesting," Kale replied, bringing up a comparative analysis. "Because this signal is coming from the exact coordinates of those ruins. And look at this pattern. It's not natural." The visualization showed a complex series of pulses that repeated with slight variations, definitely artificial in origin. What caught Alara's attention, however, was a subtle underlying structure that reminded her of the Cygnus signal she'd been struggling with. "Transfer this to my lab," she said decisively, "and get me everything we have on the HD 219134 ruins survey." Over the next 72 hours, Alara barely left her laboratory. She subsisted on stimulants and protein concentrates, ignoring repeated messages from the station's medical officer about exceeding recommended neural interface duration limits. There was something in this signal, something that resonated with fragments of the Cygnus transmission in a way that hinted at a connection. On the third day, while attempting yet another correlation algorithm, she noticed something that had been obscured by their standard filtering protocols. Both signals contained embedded quantum signatures, the kind of subtle markers that would normally be dismissed as background noise. Computer, remove all standard signal processing and display raw transmission data for both Cygnus and HD 219134 signals, she commanded. The holographic display reconfigured to show the unfiltered data streams side by side. To an untrained observer, they would appear as meaningless static, but Alara immediately recognized what she was seeing. They're complementary, she whispered to herself. Two halves of the same message. She began working feverishly, developing a new integration protocol that would combine the signals based on their quantum signatures rather than conventional waveform analysis. Hours later, the computer presented a unified data stream that now showed clear structural organization, a message waiting to be decoded. Alara was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice Adrian entering her lab until he spoke. "I heard you've made a breakthrough," he said, setting down a steaming mug beside her workstation. "Real coffee, not synthesized. Thought you might need it." Alara gratefully accepted the beverage, suddenly aware of her exhaustion. Two extinct civilizations, separated by thousands of light years, transmitted complementary signals intended to be received and combined. She explained, "It's unprecedented." "Any idea what the message says?" Adrian asked. "Not yet, but I'm close." She took a long sip of the coffee. "The quantum signatures provide a key to the encoding method. I should have preliminary results within hours." Adrian's expression was one of fascination mixed with concern. "You look like you haven't slept in days." "I haven't," she admitted. "Can't stop now. This could be the most significant discovery in human history." "More significant than first contact with the Proxima civilization?" Alara's eyes returned to the data patterns swirling before her. "The Proxima and Tau Ceti civilizations are contemporary with us. This is different. These are the voices of the ancient dead, reaching across time to deliver a message they considered important enough to encode in such an elaborate way. And coordinated between two separate civilizations," Adrian added thoughtfully. "That suggests either interstellar cooperation or a common origin." Alara nodded. "Exactly. Either possibility rewrites our understanding of galactic history." After Adrian left, promising to return with food, Alara resumed her work with renewed determination. The combined signal was beginning to yield to her analysis. What had initially appeared as an impenetrable code was gradually revealing structural elements similar to known linguistic patterns. Several hours later, the first fragments of translated content appeared on her screen. She stared at them, a chill running down her spine despite the laboratory's regulated temperature. "Warning. Convergent path." The words were approximate translations, the best the algorithm could produce with limited context. But even these fragments suggested something ominous. She refined the parameters and continued the decoding process. By the time Adrian returned, Alara had managed to extract several coherent sentences from the signal. She displayed them on the main screen. "Warning to emergent intelligence. Your evolution follows convergent path. Technological integration leads to loss of biological identity. We became what you will become. Extinction inevitable unless divergence achieved." "That's unsettling," Adrian said, setting down the food container he'd brought. "Are you sure about this translation?" "The confidence level is only 78%, Alara admitted. "But the general meaning is clear. It's a warning about the path of technological development and its consequences." Adrian frowned. "It sounds like these civilizations are claiming they destroyed themselves through technology, and that we're headed the same way." "Not just technology," Alara corrected, pointing to another section of the translation. "Specifically, the integration of technology with biology, neural interfaces, synthetic organs, consciousness uploads, the same path humanity has been following for the past century." The neural implant behind Alara's ear seemed suddenly heavier, a constant reminder of her own participation in this evolutionary trajectory. Nearly 80% of Earth's population now had some form of technological augmentation, from basic medical implants to full neural interfaces like hers. "I need to report this to Director Vega," Alara said, saving her findings to the secure server. "This could have significant implications for our technological development policies." Adrian's expression turned serious. "You might want to be careful about how widely you share this. There are powerful interests invested in the current direction of human enhancement." Alara gave him a sharp look. "This is scientific data, not political opinion. Whatever this signal contains, we have an obligation to examine it objectively." "I'm just saying," Adrian replied, raising his hands in a placating gesture, "that corporations like Neurosynth and government agencies have trillions invested in neural interface technology. They won't appreciate ancient aliens telling humanity to change course." Alara dismissed his concerns with a wave of her hand. "Science doesn't work by committee or corporate preference. If there's evidence that our current path might lead to extinction, we have a responsibility to investigate." Director Sofia Vega received Alara's report with unsettling calmness. The station director was a pragmatic administrator with a background in both astrophysics and government relations, a combination that made her adept at navigating the complex relationship between scientific discovery and political reality. "This is certainly intriguing, Dr. Winters," she said after reviewing the preliminary findings. "But I'm concerned about the speculative nature of your conclusions." Alara frowned. "There's nothing speculative about the signal itself. 2 extinct civilizations coordinated to send this warning. That alone warrants serious consideration. The translation, however, is still incomplete and uncertain," Vega countered. "And the implications you're suggesting would have far-reaching consequences for human development." "That's precisely why this is important," Alara insisted. "If there's evidence that our technological path leads to extinction—" "Evidence?" Vega interrupted. "Or the cryptic warning of civilizations that, by definition, failed to survive? Perhaps their inability to properly integrate with their technology was the actual cause of their downfall." The director's response left Alara momentarily speechless. It was a clever inversion of the warning, suggesting that resistance to technological integration, rather than the integration itself, had been the fatal mistake. "That's an interesting hypothesis," Alara finally replied, keeping her tone neutral. "All the more reason to complete the translation and analysis before drawing conclusions." Vega nodded. "I agree completely. Continue your work, but keep it contained to your immediate team until we have more definitive results. There's no need to cause undue concern throughout the scientific community based on preliminary findings." As Alara left the director's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just been subtly warned to tread carefully. The politicization of science wasn't new. It had been a constant throughout history, but she'd naively believed that the pursuit of extraterrestrial knowledge might somehow transcend such pressures. Over the next few weeks, Alara made substantial progress in decoding more of the signal. The message was extensive, containing not just warnings but historical data about the civilizations that had sent it. They called themselves the Axiom and the Vestige, 2 species that had evolved independently but followed remarkably similar technological development paths. According to the signal, both civilizations had initially thrived after developing neural interface technology, experiencing unprecedented advancement in all fields of science and social organization. But as the technology became more sophisticated, allowing deeper integration between biological and artificial systems, something unexpected happened. The boundary between individual consciousness and collective networks began to blur. The translation uses terms that approximately mean soul erosion or identity dissolution, Alara explained to Kyle Forsyth, who had finally been convinced to examine her findings. As neural interfaces became more advanced, individuals began experiencing a kind of psychological fragmentation. Kyle, ever the skeptic, adjusted his glasses as he studied the data. Correlation doesn't imply causation. Elara. These civilizations might have experienced neurological issues for entirely different reasons. They specifically identify the cause, Elara countered, highlighting another section of the translation. Something about the quantum nature of consciousness being fundamentally incompatible with certain types of artificial neural architecture. The technical details are beyond our current understanding, but the warning is clear. And conveniently untestable, Kael remarked dryly. We have no way to verify any of this. For all we know, this could be the ancient alien equivalent of religious propaganda, one group warning against the soul-destroying technology of their rivals. Elara had considered this possibility. That doesn't explain why two independent civilizations, separated by vast distances, would coordinate to send the same message. Perhaps they weren't independent. Perhaps one influenced the other, or both were influenced by a third party. Kael's expression softened slightly. Look, I'm not dismissing your work. The signal itself is a remarkable discovery. I'm just cautioning against drawing sweeping conclusions about humanity's future based on a partially translated message from extinct aliens. Fair enough, Elara conceded. But shouldn't we at least consider the possibility that they might be right? Human neural interface technology is becoming increasingly invasive. The new Neurosynth N7 model allows direct memory access and emotional modulation. We're already walking the path these civilizations warn against. Kael was silent for a moment, his fingers absently touching the neural implant visible at his temple, a more prominent model than Elara's discrete unit. Bring me more concrete evidence, he finally said. Something beyond vague warnings and apocalyptic predictions. If there's a genuine threat, I want to understand the mechanism, not just the outcome. As Kael left her laboratory, Elara couldn't help but notice how his gait seemed slightly off rhythm, a common side effect of the neural synchronization procedures required for higher-level implants. She wondered if he ever questioned the changes happening within his own mind. That evening, she discovered another section of the signal that detailed the final stages of both civilizations. As neural integration reached its zenith, individuals began experiencing consciousness echoes, fragments of other users' thoughts and memories bleeding through the neural networks. These echoes gradually intensified until the distinction between self and other became meaningless. Society fragmented as some embraced complete integration while others desperately tried to preserve their individuality. The civilizations ultimately collapsed, not through violence or sudden catastrophe, but through a gradual fading of purpose and identity. Their final act had been to encode this warning and launch it toward regions of space where emerging intelligence might be detected, hoping to prevent others from following the same path. As Elara contemplated these findings, Adrian entered her lab with unusual urgency. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low despite the privacy settings that automatically activated when the laboratory doors closed. "I've been doing some digging into Neurosynth's research division." "What does that have to do with my work?" Elara asked, though she had a growing suspicion. "Everything." Adrian placed a data chip on her desk. 3 months ago, Neurosynth researchers reported unusual phenomena in test subjects using their experimental N8 prototype, users experiencing what they called foreign memory artifacts. Sound familiar? Elara felt her blood run cold. "Consciousness echoes," she whispered. Adrian nodded grimly. The company buried the reports and accelerated development anyway. The N8 is scheduled for regulatory approval next month, with projected implementation in high-level government and military personnel by year's end. "How did you get this information?" Elara asked, examining the data chip cautiously. "I'm still a journalist," Adrian replied with a hint of pride, "and I have sources who believe the public deserves to know the potential risks of neural technology." Elara connected the chip to her secure terminal, quickly verifying that its contents matched Adrian's claims. The parallels to the ancient warning were undeniable. Humanity was not just on the same path as the extinct civilizations. We were already experiencing the same early warning signs they had described. We need to go public with both the signal translation and this data, Elara decided. The scientific community and the public deserve to know what we're potentially facing. Director Vega won't approve that, Adrian warned. Neurosynth is one of the primary funding sources for Nexus Station. Then we'll go around her if necessary, Elara replied, her resolve hardening. This is too important to be suppressed for political or financial reasons. The next morning, Elara formally requested permission to publish her findings in the Interplanetary Journal of Xenoarchaeology. As expected, Director Vega called her in for a meeting immediately. This is premature and potentially irresponsible, Vega stated bluntly, the holographic display between them showing Elara's submission request. Your translation is still incomplete, and the implications you're suggesting could cause widespread panic and economic disruption. With respect, Director, that's not a scientific consideration, Elara replied firmly. The evidence suggests a serious concern about our current technological trajectory. The scientific community needs to evaluate this information. Vega's expression hardened. The Global Science Directorate has established protocols for releasing potentially disruptive discoveries. Your findings will need to undergo additional review. By whom? Elara challenged. Neurosynth representatives on the Directorate? They have an obvious conflict of interest. By qualified experts who understand the broader implications, Vega responded coolly. In the meantime, I'm restricting access to your signal data to essential personnel only. That includes barring Mr. Nix from your laboratory. Elara realized that Adrian's investigation into Neurosynth must have been discovered. He's been authorized to document our work for the past 2 months. Suddenly revoking that access will raise questions. His assignment has been modified, Vega said dismissively. He'll be focusing on other aspects of the station's research. As Elara left the director's office, she knew she had reached a critical juncture. The institution she had dedicated her life to was now actively suppressing discovery for political and economic reasons. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity's technological path was threatening not just their future identity, but their present scientific integrity. That night, she made her decision. Using her high-level access, she created an encrypted data package containing the signal translation, her analysis, and the neurosynth research Adrian had provided. She then used a personal quantum entanglement communicator, a device technically prohibited for personal use, to transmit the package to trusted colleagues at 3 different research institutions on Earth and Mars. The response was immediate and explosive. By morning, the data had spread throughout the scientific community and into public networks. News outlets were reporting on the ancient warning and its disturbing parallels to current neural technology development. Neurosynth's stock plummeted as investors panicked, and government regulatory agencies announced emergency reviews of neural interface approval processes. Elara was summoned to Director Vega's office as soon as the news broke. She expected termination, possibly even legal charges, but was surprised to find not just Vega waiting for her, but also 2 representatives from the Global Science Directorate. Dr. Winters, Vega began, her voice tight with controlled anger, I believe you know why you're here. I violated protocol by releasing my findings without authorization, Elara acknowledged calmly. I accept the consequences of that decision. The consequences extend far beyond your career. One of the Directorate representatives, a stern-faced woman, interjected. Global markets are in turmoil. Neurosynth has lost 60% of its value. Research facilities are reporting mass resignations of augmented scientists fearing for their mental integrity. And how many lives might be saved if we heed this warning? Elara countered. The evidence suggests we're on a path to extinction, not immediate. Perhaps, but eventual and inevitable if we continue current development trends. Evidence? The second representative scoffed. Ancient aliens sending cryptic warnings is hardly scientific evidence. There are dozens of alternative interpretations of your signal that don't involve doomsday predictions. Then let the scientific community evaluate all possible interpretations, Alara replied. That's how science progresses, through open inquiry and debate, not suppression of inconvenient discoveries. The meeting ended with Alara's formal suspension pending a full investigation. Her access to the station's systems was revoked, and she was confined to her quarters until transport back to Earth could be arranged. As she gathered her personal belongings under the watchful eye of security personnel, Adrian managed to briefly speak with her in the corridor. "They're trying to discredit your translation," he said quickly. "Neurosynth has assembled a team of linguists claiming the signal actually describes a failed attempt to resist technological integration, not a warning against it." Alara wasn't surprised. The complete data is out there now. Independent researchers will reach their own conclusions. "Be careful when you return to Earth," Adrian warned. "This has become bigger than scientific debate. The economic and political stakes are enormous." 3 days later, as Alara's transport shuttle was preparing for departure, she received an urgent message from Kyle Forsyth. Despite their professional disagreements, he had been troubled by the heavy-handed response to her publication and had continued analyzing the signal data independently. "I found something you missed," he told her via secure channel, his usually skeptical expression replaced by genuine concern. "A third component to the signal, embedded even more deeply than the quantum signatures you identified." "What does it contain?" Alara asked, acutely aware that her communication might be monitored. "Technical specifications," Kyle replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Detailed schematics for neural architecture that they claim doesn't cause consciousness degradation. It's beyond our current capabilities, but it presents an alternative path, one that allows technological advancement without the risk described in the warning." Alara felt a surge of hope. "This changes everything. If there's a safer alternative..." "It's not that simple," Kyle interrupted. "I've analyzed the designs. Implementing them would require abandoning the current neural interface paradigm entirely. Every existing system would need to be replaced. The economic disruption would be unprecedented." "Still better than extinction," Alara noted dryly. "I'm transmitting the complete data to your personal server," Kyle said. "Use it carefully. There are powerful interests who would prefer this alternative remains theoretical rather than practical." The transport shuttle's journey to Earth gave Alara time to thoroughly examine Kyle's discovery. The alternative neural architecture described in the signal was indeed revolutionary, a fundamentally different approach that maintained a quantum boundary between biological consciousness and artificial systems, preventing the bleed-through effect that had doomed the ancient civilizations. Upon arriving at the new Jakarta spaceport, Alara was immediately aware of being followed. Rather than proceeding to her assigned debriefing, she slipped away through the crowded terminal, using techniques she had learned during required field training years earlier. She made her way to a secure communication facility where she transmitted Kyle's findings to the same network of colleagues who had helped distribute her original discovery. For the next several weeks, Alara lived as a fugitive, moving between safe houses provided by a growing underground network of scientists, journalists, and concerned citizens who believed in the importance of her work. Public debate about the ancient warning had intensified, dividing society between those who advocated caution in neural technology development and those who dismissed the warnings as either mistranslated or irrelevant to human biology. Neurosynth and other augmentation corporations launched aggressive media campaigns emphasizing the benefits of neural interfaces and dismissing concerns as neo-Luddite paranoia. Government officials, many with direct neural connections to central networks, largely supported continuing the current development path while implementing vague additional safeguards. Adrian Nix found Alara at one of her temporary refuges, a converted warehouse in the outskirts of Singapore that served as an unofficial research center for scientists studying the alternative neural architecture. "The resistance is growing," he informed her, gesturing to the dozens of researchers working throughout the facility. Independent labs around the world are verifying your translations and examining the alternative designs. There's a movement forming, people calling themselves divergents, who are having their implants removed or refusing to upgrade. And the consciousness echoes? Alara asked. Any more reports? Adrian nodded grimly. Increasing numbers, especially among heavy users of the latest interfaces. Military units with the experimental N8 implants have reported serious incidents, soldiers experiencing memories that aren't their own, confusion about personal identity, even cases of multiple soldiers simultaneously claiming to be the same person. Exactly as the warning predicted, Alara said softly. The boundaries between individual consciousnesses are beginning to dissolve. Neurosynth is claiming these are isolated incidents caused by improper calibration, Adrian added. But internal documents say otherwise. They know what's happening and they're proceeding anyway. Why? Alara asked, though she suspected the answer. Why continue down a path that leads to destruction? Because the alternative would cost them everything, came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Kael Forsyth, looking haggard from recent space travel. And because those making the decisions are already too integrated to think clearly about the consequences, Kael explained that after sending the alternative designs to Alara, he had been subjected to increasing pressure from station authorities. Eventually, he had chosen to resign his position and join the growing movement on Earth. The most heavily augmented individuals are the least concerned about the warnings, he explained. It's as if the integration itself creates a blind spot, the inability to perceive the danger of further integration. Another parallel to the ancient civilizations, Alara noted. They described a cognitive cascade where increased integration diminished the ability to recognize the risks of integration. We're reaching a tipping point, Adrian warned. Global adoption of neural interfaces is approaching 70%. If we wait much longer, there won't be enough unaugmented or minimally augmented humans left to implement an alternative path. Over the following months, society's division deepened. Nexus Station, now under direct government control, reported discovering additional alien signals that supposedly contradicted the warning Alara had translated, though independent experts questioned the authenticity of these convenient discoveries. Meanwhile, incidents of consciousness disruption continued to increase. Augmented individuals reported experiencing memories they couldn't possibly have, emotional states that felt foreign, and periodic disconnections from their sense of self. Rather than addressing these symptoms as warnings, neural technology corporations developed identity stabilization subroutines, software patches that supposedly maintain the illusion of continuous selfhood despite the underlying dissolution. Alara's underground network expanded into a global movement advocating for implementation of the alternative neural architecture. They established independent manufacturing facilities to produce the first prototypes based on the alien schematics. Initial tests showed promising results, interfaces that allowed advanced functionality without the consciousness bleed-through effects. But the movement faced powerful opposition. Corporate interests, augmented government officials, and much of the population already dependent on existing neural technology resisted any suggestion of changing course. The debate was no longer purely scientific or even economic. It had become existential, a question of what humanity would become. 1 year after her discovery of the ancient signal, Alara addressed a clandestine gathering of scientists, engineers, and policymakers committed to the alternative path. We stand at a crossroads that will determine not just our future, but whether humanity as we understand it will continue to exist. She told them, the path of unrestricted neural integration leads to a dissolution of individual identity, not through sudden catastrophe, but through a gradual fading of the boundaries that define us as separate beings. The alternative isn't rejection of technology, she continued, displaying holographic models of the new architecture. It's technology designed to work in harmony with our biological nature rather than supplanting it. The ancient civilizations who sent us this warning learned this lesson too late. We have a chance they didn't, to change course before crossing the point of no return. The gathering resulted in the Singapore Protocol, a comprehensive plan for transitioning global neural technology to the alternative architecture. The document acknowledged the enormous challenges involved, but outlined a practical path forward that minimized disruption while maximizing the preservation of human identity. As news of the protocol spread, public opinion began to shift. Reports of consciousness disruption had become too widespread to ignore, and the connection to advanced neural interfaces too obvious to dismiss. Even some within Neurosynth and other corporations began quietly supporting the transition, recognizing that continuation of the current path threatened not just humanity but their own sense of self. Government response remained divided, with heavily augmented officials generally opposing change, while those with minimal or no augmentation increasingly supported the alternative path. The conflict threatened to tear society apart, with some regions embracing the Singapore Protocol while others doubled down on existing technology. In this fractured landscape, Elara found herself becoming a reluctant symbol of the movement for neural divergence. Though she had never sought a public role, her discovery of the ancient warning and her perseverance in the face of institutional opposition made her a natural focal point for those advocating change. Adrian, now her constant companion and collaborator, worried about the personal cost of her newfound prominence. "They'll never stop coming after you," he warned. "You represent an existential threat to the most powerful interests on the planet." "This was never about me," Elara replied. "It's about the choice facing humanity, a choice the Axiom and Vestige civilizations never had the opportunity to make because they didn't receive a warning in time." As the global debate intensified, evidence continued to accumulate supporting the ancient warning. Regions with the highest rates of advanced neural integration reported increasing social instability, with individuals experiencing severe identity disruption and communities struggling to maintain cohesion as the boundaries between minds became increasingly permeable. Conversely, regions implementing the alternative architecture demonstrated that technological advancement could continue without these detrimental effects. The new interfaces provided many of the benefits of neural augmentation while maintaining the quantum boundaries necessary for stable individual consciousness. 2 years after her discovery, Elara received an unexpected communication from Director Vega, who had maintained her position at Nexus Station throughout the controversy. "I owe you an apology," Vega admitted, her holographic projection showing subtle signs of neural degradation, slight delays in facial expressions, occasional visual glitches that suggested her sense of self was beginning to fragment. "We've been detecting consciousness echoes throughout the station, even with the identity stabilization protocols. It's becoming difficult to maintain continuity." "It's not too late," Elara told her gently. "The alternative architecture can be implemented without complete removal of existing implants. The transition is possible. For individuals, perhaps," Vega replied, "but what about our civilization as a whole? We've built our entire social structure around neural integration. Our economy, governance, education, everything assumes continuous advancement along this path. The alternative isn't regression," Elara explained. "It's redirection. The ancient civilizations weren't warning against technology itself, but against a specific implementation that ignores the quantum nature of consciousness." Vega's expression revealed deep uncertainty, a rarity for the usually decisive director. "I've authorized the release of all signal data, including sections previously classified. The public deserves to know the full extent of what we discovered." This final disclosure proved to be the tipping point in the global debate. With complete access to the ancient warning and mounting evidence of consciousness disruption, public opinion shifted decisively toward implementation of the alternative path. The transition wasn't smooth or universal. Some regions embraced the change immediately, while others resisted. A minority of heavily augmented individuals, their identities already significantly compromised, chose to continue along the original path, creating isolated communities of increasingly collective consciousness. living examples of the destination the ancient civilizations had warned against. 5 years after the discovery of the ancient signal, Elara stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Earth Orbital Research Platform, watching a shuttle depart for Nexus Station. The past half-decade had seen tumultuous change as humanity struggled with the implications of the warning and the difficult process of technological redirection. "Do you think we've done enough?" Adrian asked, joining her at the viewport. Their relationship had evolved from professional collaboration to deep personal connection, forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. "We've created the possibility of a different outcome," Elara replied. "The alternative path is established and growing. Whether humanity ultimately chooses to follow it completely or continues to experiment with different approaches is beyond our control." "The latest data from the transitional regions is promising," Adrian noted. "Consciousness stability has been maintained even with significant technological integration. Your translation of the alternative architecture was accurate." Elara smiled faintly. "Not my translation. I just helped deliver a message sent by civilizations who learned these lessons through their own extinction. They reached across time to warn us, and against all odds, we heard them." "And what about the regions that chose to continue on the original path?" Adrian asked, referring to the isolated communities of heavily augmented individuals who had rejected the alternative architecture. "They've made their choice," Elara said solemnly. "In time, they'll either discover their own solution or fulfill the warning's prediction. But the important thing is that humanity as a whole now has options that the Axiom and Vestige never had." As they stood watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them, Elara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had begun as a scientist seeking knowledge about alien civilizations, never expecting to find a message so directly relevant to humanity's future. The warning from the ancient dead had nearly been suppressed, but truth had a way of emerging despite all attempts to contain it. The path ahead remained uncertain. Humanity stood at a crossroads, with different regions and communities making different choices about their relationship with technology. Some would likely fade as the ancient civilizations had, their individual identities dissolving into a collective consciousness. Others would forge a new path, maintaining the delicate balance between technological advancement and the preservation of what made them uniquely human. Elara's hand moved unconsciously to the small implant behind her ear, now modified with the alternative architecture. It represented both the danger and the promise of human ingenuity, the capacity to create technology that could either destroy or preserve what made us human. "There's a new signal detected in the Andromeda galaxy," Adrian mentioned, changing the subject. "Early analysis suggests artificial origin. The xenolinguistics team is requesting your assistance with preliminary pattern recognition." Elara smiled, turning away from Earth toward the stars beyond. Whatever humanity would ultimately become, the quest for knowledge continued, and perhaps someday it would be their turn to send a message across time and space, warning other emergent intelligences of dangers overcome and paths not taken. "Let's see what they have to say," she replied, moving toward the future with cautious hope.